Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, for those of you who've been following current events for the last few years, you know that we have been through quite a tumultuous time, which has, of course, led to a mass rash of new firearm purchases, hoarding of ammunition, skyrocketing inflation, skyrocketing crime, and, of course, all of that is caused by one thing and one thing only: Vladimir Putin. But I digress. But seriously, the run on firearm sales and the run on ammunition, especially in the middle of the pandemic, made it virtually impossible for many of us to actually find affordable ammunition, if we could find any at all. And that got a lot of us into reloading. Well, I found some laws that I think we all need to talk about. So let's spend a couple minutes today talking about why you need to know these laws if you're reloading in Washington State. Okay, before we get rolling, you guys know the drill. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button. If you want to stay up to date on issues related to your Second Amendment rights here in Washington or on a nationwide level, click that subscribe button. Click the little bell logo if you want to be notified when we post new videos. And most importantly, let's keep the comments and discussions coming. That's how we're going to make sure we're getting our video out to more lawful and responsible gun owners like yourself. Okay, well, as we begin, I'm going to let you all know that I personally do not reload. I buy all of my ammunition. I'd rather let a professional make what's going to blow up in front of my face. However, I do have, and I recognize it is a very safe activity. If you know what you're doing, the ammunition is incredibly reliable, incredibly dependable, very safe to handle. But I just personally don't have the time or the interest in doing my own reloading. Now, many of you are quite different. You are doing it, and I think that's fantastic, okay? But what happened here is I had a viewer call me and said, hey, Bill, I want to ask you about the other destructive devices in the NFA and what kind of regulations might there be in Washington law on that. Well, I started doing some research, and I realized that there was no real state regulation. That's all handled by the feds. But in doing my research, lo and behold, I come upon RCW 70.74, which none of you have ever heard of, and I've been a lawyer for 25 years now, and candidly, I hadn't heard of it either. What is RCW 70.74? Well, it's the Uniform Explosives Act for the state of Washington. It is all the legislation which regulates the storage and transportation of explosives. Well, I'm sitting down over lunch, and for those of you who know me, I geek out on the law all the time. So I started reading all of these sections, and yeah, 90% of it deals with huge, massive explosions, the kind that are used in construction projects, demolition, road construction, other heavy industrial applications of explosives. But I find out in the statute that there is a bunch of statutes in there that relate to you, the lawful and responsible gun owner, who happens to be doing some reloading. So I called my friends, both of which, again, they're really talented, well-versed, very educated, knowledgeable reloaders, and I asked them about these laws, and the response I got was, huh? Is that really the law? So I figured this is a good opportunity to do a little education today. Now, again, I'm not saying that I'm supporting these laws. I'm not saying that these laws should be abolished. What I am saying is, hey, these are the laws, and if you want to continue to be the lawful and responsible gun owner like we preach here, let's operate within the confines of them. Okay, before we get into the actual statutes here, we're going to have to define a term that we're going to see pop up, and the term is magazine. Now, we have spent a lot of time talking about magazines here at Washington Gun Law, but that's due to Senate Bill 5078 and the new high-capacity magazine ban. I'm not talking about those types of magazines. I'm talking about magazines which are essentially receptacles which are meant to store explosive devices. It is defined, and as we know for all of us who geek out on the channel, that we're going to usually find the definition section right at the very beginning of a large legislative scheme. So in 70.74.010, magazine is defined as, the term magazine shall be held to mean and include any building or other structure other than explosive manufacturing building used for the storage of explosives. And I bring that only to your attention because you may hear me use the term magazine somewhere else throughout this video, and I don't want you to think that I'm talking about a magazine which holds ammunition. Okay, now the next statutes that I'm going to share with you are all found in sequential order, and each of these deal with you, the lawful and responsible reloader out there. They're RCW 70.74.320, 330, 340, and 350. Now, RCW 70.74.320 sets some very clear restrictions on the transportation of certain items, including the federal regulations of the United States Department of Transportation on the transportation of small arms ammunition, of small arms ammunition primers, and of small arms smokeless propellants are hereby adopted in this chapter by reference. And I'm not going to bore you with what the federal regulations say, but if you really want to geek out on it, I will put the link down below to 49 CFR section 173.63. Now, 70.74.330 has some very important storage requirements, and I want all of you to pay attention to this. That statute states, small arms ammunition shall be separated from flammable liquids, flammable solids, and oxidizing materials by a fire-resistant wall of 1 hour rating or by a distance of 25 feet. So your ammunition has to be stored differently from any powder or liquid propellants. You have to have either a certain approved type of wall between it, or you have to have a distance of 25 feet between those materials. Now, 70.74.340 is by far the most complicated of the statutes, or I should say the longest of the statutes, as you can see right here. So I'm going to break this down in each little visual section, but it talks really a lot here about both transportation and storage of certain materials used for reloading. The statute states, quantities of small arms smokeless propellant Class B in shipping containers approved by the Federal Department of Transportation not in excess of 50 pounds may be transported in a private vehicle. Quantities in excess of 25 pounds, but not to exceed 50 pounds in a private passenger vehicle, shall be transported in an approved magazine as specified by the Department of Labor and Industry's rules and regulations. And finally, there's one more restriction on transportation of some of these materials. Transportations of quantities in excess of 50 pounds is prohibited in passenger vehicles, provided that this requirement shall not apply to duly licensed dealers. And then the same statute essentially has some safe storage provisions in there, including the following. Small arms smokeless propellant intended for personal use in quantities not to exceed 25 pounds may be stored without restriction in residences. Quantities over 25 pounds, but not to exceed 50 pounds, shall be stored in a strong box or cabinet constructed with 3/4 inch plywood minimum or equivalent on all sides, top and bottom. So if you have smokeless propellant in your house and you have less than 25 pounds, you can kind of store that in any safe, responsible manner. If you have more than 25 pounds, less than 50, you're going to have a secured box for it. Well, what about black powder, you say? Well, this statute also speaks to that because it specifically states, black powder as used in muzzle-loading firearms may be transported in a private vehicle or stored without restriction in private residence in quantities not to exceed 5 pounds. So you can see there's a big difference between black powder and smokeless for many reasons. Safety is one of them, where we can store up to 25 to 50 pounds of the smokeless stuff. But when it comes to the black powder, 5 pounds is the limit. You cannot store more than that. And then listen, for those of you that are FFLs or you're running retail operations that are supplying reloading supplies, I want you to pay careful attention to the second half of the statute. I'm not going to get into it on this video, but it has some very specific restrictions about the amount of material you can store, how it needs to be stored, distances between different types of materials, and you do need to pay careful attention to that. And then finally, 70.74.350 talks about primers. Yes, there is a whole statute that talks about primers, and we need to be aware of that too, because the statute says, small arms ammunition primers shall not be transported or stored except in the original shipping container approved by the Federal Department of Transportation. So when we're transporting primers, they are always going to be in the original packaging. Now, how about storage provisions? And how about quantity limitations? Well, the statute speaks to that as well. No more than 25,000 small arms ammunition primers shall be transported in a private passenger vehicle, provided that this requirement shall not apply to duly licensed dealers. Quantities not to exceed 10,000 small arms ammunition primers may be stored in a residence. So if we're transporting, we can transport no more than 25,000 primers. If we're going to store in a private residence, we can have no more than 10,000 primers in our private residence. And yes, there are provisions, safe storage provisions, on how the primers need to be stored, including small arms ammunition primers shall be separate from flammable liquids, flammable solids, and oxidizing materials by a fire-resistant wall of 1 hour rating or by a distance of 25 feet. And then finally, if you're really into hoarding the primers, and that would be difficult to do under the current economic situation. However, if you are, please be aware, not more than 750,000 small arms ammunition primers shall be stored in any one building except as next provided. No more than 100,000 shall be stored in any one pile, and piles shall be separated by at least 15 feet. And certainly if you have that many primers, congratulations to you. So the bottom line is that if these ammunition restrictions and the price gouging that's been taking place continue, we are likely to see more and more people wanting to get into the art, the hobby, if you would, of reloading. Please be aware that there are many statutes that do govern where we store materials, how we transport materials, how much of that material we can have. And if we are in violation, not only are we not being the lawful and responsible gun owner, but we subject ourselves to criminal liability. But here's something else I want you to think about. Let's say that we are violating these laws. We have way too much of this material, or we're improperly storing that material, and then we have an accident at the home. We have a fire or something like that. And then the homeowner's insurance finds out what you were storing and how you were storing it at your home. You don't need to go to law school to learn how to do insurance law. It's pretty simple. You always need to pay your premiums on time. The minute you look to file a claim, they will look for a way to not pay it. It's really that simple. So, as I stated earlier, part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner is to apprise you of what the laws are so that you can act within the confines of them. Listen, you may have more questions about these laws related to reloading supplies or anything else related to your Second Amendment rights, and if you do, don't ever hesitate to contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or of course you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now let's remember, part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching, and stay safe. Hey everyone, thanks for watching Washington Gun Law TV. Your support has been tremendous, and I wanted to remind all of you that we're going live once again Monday, April 4th at 7 o'clock. That's 7 p.m. Pacific time, Monday, April 4th, right here on YouTube. We'll have lots to talk about between the legislative session wrapping up, the ATF, and various other world events. I'm sure that we will not be bored at any time during that hour. So listen, join us Monday, April 4th, 7 p.m. right here on YouTube. In the meantime, stay safe.